The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Buckingham Palace as Captain Marcus Wellington adjusted his ceremonial sword for what he believed would be another routine day of royal protection duties. At 35 years old, Marcus had dedicated 15 years of his life to the Royal Guard, rising through the ranks with unwavering discipline and an impeccable service record. His square jaw and steel-gray eyes reflected the seriousness with which he approached his responsibilities, never once questioning the protocols that governed his every movement within the palace walls. The day began like countless others, with Marcus conducting his morning briefing with the security team in the oak-paneled briefing room. Maps of the palace grounds covered the walls, marked with colored pins indicating guard positions, escape routes, and potential security vulnerabilities. His team of 24 guards listened intently as he outlined the day's schedule, which included a private meeting between Prince George and several high-ranking government officials in the blue drawing room. Prince George, now 28 and third in line to the throne, had been displaying increasingly erratic behavior over the past several months. Palace staff whispered about his late-night disappearances, his confrontational attitude toward established royal protocols, and his growing circle of questionable associates who seemed to encourage his rebellious tendencies. Marcus had observed these changes firsthand during his security duties, noting how the prince's once respectful demeanor had transformed into something more volatile and unpredictable. The first sign of trouble came during the mid-morning when Marcus received an urgent communication through his encrypted radio device. Prince George had apparently dismissed his personal security detail and was demanding to meet with foreign dignitaries without proper vetting procedures. This breach of protocol sent immediate alarm bells through the palace security network, as any unvetted contact with royal family members posed significant risks to national security. Marcus quickly assembled his rapid response team and made his way to the West Wing, where Prince George was reportedly holding court in his private chambers. The corridors seemed unusually quiet as they moved through the palace, their footsteps echoing off the ancient stone walls adorned with centuries-old portraits of former monarchs. The weight of history seemed to press down upon them as they approached what would become a defining moment in Marcus's career. Upon reaching Prince George's chambers, Marcus could hear raised voices coming from behind the heavy wooden doors. Through the ornate keyhole, he glimpsed several unidentified individuals in expensive suits gesturing animatedly, while Prince George paced back and forth, his face flushed with apparent anger or excitement. The prince's usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his tie loosened, and his hair unkempt, suggesting he had been engaged in heated discussions for some time. Marcus made the decision to knock firmly on the door, following standard protocol for interrupting royal activities when security concerns arose. The voices inside immediately fell silent, followed by the sound of chairs scraping against the floor and hushed whispers. After several tense moments, Prince George's voice called out, demanding to know who dared disturb his private meeting. When Marcus identified himself and requested entry to conduct a routine security check, Prince George's response was explosive. The prince yanked open the door with such force that it crashed against the interior wall, his eyes blazing with fury as he confronted the captain. The foreign dignitaries behind him appeared nervous, clearly unprepared for the confrontational scene that was unfolding before them. Prince George launched into a tirade about his rights as a member of the royal family, claiming that he was being treated like a prisoner in his own home. His voice carried down the hallway, causing other palace staff members to peer cautiously around corners to witness the unprecedented display of royal anger. Marcus maintained his professional composure despite the verbal assault, his training kicking in as he assessed the potential threat level of the situation. The confrontation escalated when Prince George declared that he no longer recognized the authority of the palace security protocols and would conduct his affairs as he saw fit. This statement sent shockwaves through Marcus's team, as it represented a direct challenge to the carefully structured security framework that had protected the royal family for generations. The foreign dignitaries exchanged worried glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. Marcus found himself in an impossible position, torn between his duty to protect the royal family and his obligation to enforce security protocols that Prince George was openly defying. Years of training had prepared him for external threats to the monarchy, but nothing had equipped him to handle a situation where the threat potentially came from within the royal family itself. The tension reached a breaking point when Prince George stepped closer to Marcus, his face inches away as he demanded that the captain and his team leave immediately. The prince's breath carried the unmistakable scent of alcohol, suggesting that his judgment might be impaired by substances that could further compromise his decision-making abilities. Marcus realized that he was facing a crisis that could have far-reaching implications for the stability of the monarchy. As word of the confrontation began to spread throughout the palace, Marcus knew that he would need to make a decision that could define not only his career, but potentially the future of the royal institution itself. The foreign dignitaries continued to watch nervously from the background, their presence adding an international dimension to what was rapidly becoming a domestic crisis of unprecedented proportions. The hallway filled with tension as more palace staff members gathered at a respectful distance, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock and concern at witnessing such a public display of royal discord. Marcus could feel the weight of their expectations pressing upon him as he prepared to make a choice that would echo through the halls of power for years to come. In that moment, standing face to face with Prince George while foreign dignitaries looked on, and palace staff held their breath, Marcus understood that the traditional boundaries of his role were about to be tested in ways he had never imagined possible. The carefully maintained facade of royal stability was cracking, and he found himself positioned at the epicenter of a crisis that would demand swift and decisive action to prevent a complete breakdown of palace security protocols. The silence that followed Prince George's ultimatum stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Marcus felt the eyes of everyone present boring into him as he weighed his options in the space of heartbeats that felt like hours. His right hand instinctively moved toward his radio, but he caught himself before making the gesture too obvious. The foreign dignitaries shifted uncomfortably behind Prince George, clearly recognizing that they had inadvertently become witnesses to a potentially explosive situation. Marcus made his decision with the calculated precision that had earned him his position. In a voice that carried absolute authority despite its measured tone, he informed Prince George that palace security protocols were non-negotiable, and that the unvetted individuals would need to be properly identified before any meeting could continue. The prince's face darkened further at this challenge to his authority, but Marcus pressed on, explaining that these measures existed to protect not only the royal family, but also the guests themselves. The foreign dignitaries, sensing an opportunity to de-escalate the situation, began introducing themselves and producing identification documents. They revealed themselves to be representatives of a private investment consortium interested in discussing potential business ventures with Prince George. However, their documentation raised immediate red flags for Marcus, as several of the companies they claimed to represent had been flagged by intelligence services for their connections to offshore financial networks with questionable transparency. Prince George erupted again when Marcus suggested that the meeting be postponed until proper background checks could be completed. The prince accused the captain of overstepping his authority and attempting to control his personal business dealings. His voice echoed through the corridors as he declared that he was tired of being treated like a child and demanded the freedom to conduct his affairs without constant oversight from security personnel. The confrontation took a dangerous turn when Prince George grabbed Marcus by the arm and attempted to physically remove him from the doorway. The captain's training kicked in immediately, and he smoothly deflected the prince's grip while maintaining his professional demeanor. However, this physical contact represented a serious breach of protocol that could not be ignored, regardless of who initiated it. Marcus's team immediately stepped forward, their hands moving instinctively toward their equipment as they assessed the threat level. The situation had escalated beyond a simple disagreement and was now approaching the realm of a potential security incident that could require formal documentation and reporting to higher authorities. The foreign dignitaries backed away from the confrontation, clearly understanding that their presence was no longer welcome. In that critical moment, Marcus made a decision that would fundamentally alter the power dynamics within the palace. He stepped forward and, in a voice that carried throughout the wing, declared that he was temporarily suspending Prince George's freedom of movement until the situation could be properly assessed and resolved. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap causing gasps from the assembled staff members who had never witnessed such a direct challenge to royal authority. Prince George's reaction was immediate and explosive. He lunged toward Marcus again, this time with clear aggressive intent, forcing the captain to restrain him using approved defensive techniques. The sight of a member of the royal family being physically restrained by palace security was unprecedented in modern royal history, and the shock waves of the moment rippled through everyone present. The foreign dignitaries quickly excused themselves from the scene, clearly wanting no part of what was rapidly becoming an international incident. Their hasty departure only served to reinforce Marcus's suspicions about their true motivations and the legitimacy of their business proposals. As they fled down the corridor, he made mental notes about their behavior that would later prove crucial in understanding the full scope of the situation. With Prince George now restrained and the immediate threat neutralized, Marcus faced the monumental task of deciding what to do next. Palace protocols had no clear guidelines for handling a situation where a member of the royal family posed a potential security risk through their own actions. The captain found himself in uncharted territory, where every decision could have far-reaching consequences for both his career and the institution he had sworn to protect. Marcus ordered his team to secure the area while he contacted the palace's senior administrative staff. The next few minutes were a flurry of encrypted communications as word of the incident spread through the carefully controlled channels of palace hierarchy. Each person who learned of the situation understood that they were witnessing a moment that could potentially reshape the relationship between the royal family and their protective services. The prince continued to struggle against his restraints, hurling accusations and threats at Marcus while demanding to be released immediately. His behavior only served to reinforce the captain's belief that his actions were justified, as Prince George's inability to control his temper in the face of legitimate security concerns demonstrated a concerning lack of judgment that could not be ignored. As palace officials began arriving at the scene, Marcus found himself at the center of a crisis that extended far beyond simple security protocols. The presence of questionable foreign contacts, combined with Prince George's erratic behavior and open defiance of established safeguards, painted a picture of potential vulnerabilities that could threaten the stability of the entire royal institution. The arriving officials included the palace's chief administrative officer, the head of royal communications, and several senior advisors who had been hastily summoned from various locations throughout London. Their faces reflected a mixture of shock, concern, and barely concealed panic as they assessed the situation and began formulating a response strategy. Marcus briefed the assembled officials on the events leading up to the confrontation, providing detailed accounts of Prince George's behavior, the presence of unvetted foreign contacts, and the security concerns that had prompted his decisive action. His professional demeanor and comprehensive documentation of the incident helped establish the legitimacy of his response, even as the unprecedented nature of the situation challenged everyone's understanding of established protocols. The debate that followed was intense and heated, with various officials arguing about the appropriate response to a situation that had no clear precedent in modern royal history. Some argued that Marcus had overstepped his authority and should be immediately relieved of duty, while others supported his actions as necessary to protect the integrity of palace security. Throughout the discussions, Prince George remained defiant, continuing to demand his immediate release while refusing to acknowledge that his behavior had created a legitimate security concern. His attitude only served to strengthen Marcus's position, as it demonstrated the ongoing nature of the threat that his actions had been designed to address. The weight of history pressed down upon everyone present as they grappled with the realization that they were participants in a moment that would likely be studied and analyzed for generations to come. The careful balance of power that had governed the relationship between the royal family and their protectors had been fundamentally challenged, and the resolution of this crisis would set important precedents for the future. The emergency meeting that followed stretched into the late afternoon as palace officials grappled with the unprecedented situation that Marcus had created through his decisive action. The ornate conference room, typically reserved for matters of state ceremony and diplomatic protocols, now served as the battleground for a debate that could fundamentally reshape the power structure within the British monarchy. Senior advisors huddled around polished mahogany tables, their voices hushed but urgent as they consulted legal documents and historical precedents. The chief legal counsel for the royal household arrived with armfuls of thick volumes containing centuries of royal protocol and constitutional law, searching desperately for guidance on how to handle a situation that had never before occurred in the modern era. Marcus stood at attention near the entrance to the conference room, his military bearing unchanged despite the gravity of the accusations being leveled against him. Some officials argued that his actions constituted a form of treason, as he had physically restrained a member of the royal family without explicit authorization from higher authorities. Others countered that his oath to protect the crown superseded traditional hierarchies when genuine security threats emerged. The investigation into the foreign dignitaries had begun to yield disturbing results. Intelligence services quickly confirmed that several of the companies represented by the mysterious visitors had connections to international money laundering operations and politically sensitive financial networks. The implications were staggering, suggesting that Prince George had unknowingly, or perhaps knowingly, been courting relationships with individuals who could compromise the security and reputation of the entire royal institution. Prince George remained confined to his chambers under guard, his protests echoing through the palace corridors as he demanded explanations and threatened legal action against Marcus and anyone else involved in his detention. Palace staff moved nervously through their duties, acutely aware that they were witnessing history in the making and uncertain about how the crisis would ultimately be resolved. The media had not yet caught wind of the situation, but palace communications specialists worked frantically to prepare contingency plans for various scenarios. The potential for public relations disaster loomed large, as any leaked information about internal royal conflicts could fuel years of negative coverage and constitutional debates about the role of the monarchy in modern British society. Marcus found himself called before a hastily convened panel of senior officials, where he was required to provide detailed testimony about his actions and the reasoning behind his unprecedented decision. His military training served him well during the intense questioning, as he methodically presented evidence of Prince George's concerning behavior patterns and the security risks posed by the unvetted foreign contacts. The captain's testimony revealed a troubling picture of gradual changes in Prince George's behavior over several months. Palace security logs showed increasingly frequent late-night departures from the palace, often without proper security escort protocols. Financial records, obtained through careful investigation, suggested unusual patterns of spending and potential involvement with offshore investment schemes that had not been properly vetted by royal financial advisors. As the investigation deepened, additional palace staff members were called to provide testimony about their observations of Prince George's recent conduct. Housekeeping staff reported finding evidence of unauthorized guests in the prince's chambers, while kitchen personnel noted requests for catering services for meetings that had not been officially scheduled or approved through proper channels. The picture that emerged painted Prince George as someone who had grown increasingly isolated from traditional royal support systems, while simultaneously becoming involved with individuals whose motivations and backgrounds remained questionable. The foreign dignitaries who had fled the palace during the confrontation had disappeared entirely, their contact information proving to be falsified, and their claimed business addresses non-existent. Marcus's position grew stronger as evidence mounted supporting his assessment of the security risks involved. However, the political implications of his actions continued to create significant controversy among palace officials. The precedent of a security officer effectively overruling a member of the royal family raised fundamental questions about the balance of power within the monarchy and the extent to which protective services could act independently when they perceived threats. Late in the evening, as the emergency meeting entered its 8th hour, a breakthrough occurred when intelligence services provided intercepted communications between Prince George and several of the foreign contacts. The conversations revealed discussions about potential business ventures that could have placed royal resources at risk and exposed the monarchy to foreign influence operations designed to compromise British national interests. The intercepted communications also revealed Prince George's growing resentment toward palace protocols and his expressed desire to establish independent income streams that would allow him to operate outside traditional royal financial oversight. While these sentiments were not necessarily treasonous, they demonstrated a concerning pattern of decision-making that prioritized personal autonomy over institutional security considerations. Armed with this new evidence, the panel of officials faced the difficult task of determining appropriate consequences for both Prince George and Marcus. The captain had clearly acted to prevent a potentially serious security breach, but his methods had challenged fundamental assumptions about royal authority and the limits of protective oversight. The debate intensified as different factions within the palace hierarchy advocated for various approaches to resolving the crisis. Conservative voices argued for maintaining traditional royal prerogatives and censuring Marcus for overstepping his authority, while security-minded officials pushed for stronger measures to prevent similar incidents in the future. Princess Anne arrived at the palace near midnight, summoned by senior advisors who recognized the need for a senior royal family member to provide guidance on the unprecedented situation. Her reputation for practical wisdom and no-nonsense approach to royal duties made her an ideal mediator for the complex political and security considerations at play. The princess's arrival marked a turning point in the crisis, as her presence provided legitimacy for discussions about potential reforms to palace security protocols and oversight mechanisms. Her preliminary meetings with key officials suggested that she understood the gravity of Marcus's concerns while also recognizing the need to address the constitutional implications of his actions. As dawn approached, the palace found itself forever changed by the events of the previous day. The comfortable assumptions that had governed royal security for generations had been shattered, replaced by a new awareness of vulnerabilities that extended beyond external threats to include potential risks from within the royal family itself. Marcus remained at his post, understanding that his career and reputation hung in the balance while also knowing that his actions had likely prevented a much more serious crisis. The foreign contacts had been neutralized, Prince George's questionable activities had been exposed and contained, but the long-term consequences of the confrontation remained uncertain. The palace corridors, usually bustling with the confident efficiency of well-established routines, now carried an atmosphere of uncertainty and change. Staff members whispered among themselves about the implications of recent events, while senior officials continued their marathon deliberations about how to proceed in uncharted territory that would define the future relationship between the royal family and those sworn to protect them. 3 weeks after the confrontation that shook the foundations of palace protocol, Marcus Wellington found himself standing in the same ornate conference room where his fate had been debated by senior officials. The atmosphere was markedly different now, charged with a sense of resolution rather than crisis, though the weight of recent changes hung heavy in the air like morning fog over the Thames. Princess Anne sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, her authoritative presence commanding respect from the assembled officials who had spent weeks grappling with the unprecedented situation. The investigation into Prince George's activities had concluded, revealing a web of financial entanglements and foreign contacts that confirmed Marcus's initial assessment of the security risks involved. The foreign dignitaries who had fled the palace during the confrontation had been identified as operatives working for a sophisticated influence network designed to compromise members of European royal families through seemingly legitimate business relationships. Their hasty departure and subsequent disappearance from Britain had triggered an international intelligence investigation that exposed similar operations targeting nobility across multiple countries. Prince George sat quietly to one side of the room, his demeanor vastly different from the volatile figure who had challenged Marcus's authority weeks earlier. The intensive counseling and security briefings he had received during his temporary confinement had apparently helped him understand the gravity of the situation he had unknowingly created through his pursuit of financial independence from traditional royal oversight. Marcus listened intently as Princess Anne outlined the comprehensive reforms that would reshape palace security protocols in response to the crisis. The new guidelines established clear procedures for handling situations where members of the royal family might pose security risks through their own actions, while also creating oversight mechanisms to prevent abuse of protective authority. The captain's actions had been officially vindicated after extensive review, with senior officials acknowledging that his quick thinking and decisive response had prevented what could have been a catastrophic breach of royal security. However, The precedent he had set required careful institutionalization to ensure that similar situations could be handled with proper authorization and oversight in the future. The new security framework included mandatory financial disclosure requirements for all members of the royal family, regular security briefings about potential threats from foreign influence operations, and established protocols for intervention when concerning behavioral patterns emerged. These measures represented the most significant changes to royal security procedures in over a century. Marcus was formally promoted to Chief of Royal Security, a newly created position that consolidated authority over all protective services while establishing clear reporting relationships with senior palace officials. His new role would involve not only traditional security functions, but also ongoing threat assessment and prevention of internal vulnerabilities that could compromise royal safety. The promotion ceremony was conducted with subdued formality, acknowledging both the necessity of the changes and the unfortunate circumstances that had made them required. Princess Anne personally presented Marcus with his new insignia, thanking him privately for his courage in prioritizing institutional security over personal career considerations. Prince George's rehabilitation had progressed remarkably well, with the prince expressing genuine remorse for his earlier behavior and demonstrating a new understanding of the security considerations that governed royal life. His public statement, carefully crafted by palace communication specialists, acknowledged his mistakes while emphasizing his commitment to working within established protocols in the future. The prince's business interests were restructured under professional oversight, with all potential investments and partnerships subject to thorough security review before approval. This arrangement satisfied his desire for financial independence while ensuring that royal resources and reputation would not be compromised by unsuitable associations. Media coverage of the crisis had been successfully contained through careful information management, with only vague reports of enhanced security measures reaching public attention. The royal family's reputation emerged largely intact, though internal changes represented a fundamental shift in how the monarchy approached self-governance and accountability. Marcus established his new headquarters in a renovated section of the palace that provided modern surveillance and communication capabilities while maintaining the historical character of the ancient building. His expanded team included specialists in financial intelligence, behavioral analysis, and international threat assessment, representing a comprehensive approach to royal protection. The relationship between Marcus and Prince George evolved into one of mutual respect, built on shared understanding of the lessons learned during their confrontation. The prince frequently consulted with security officials before making decisions that could have institutional implications, demonstrating his commitment to preventing similar crises in the future. Training programs for royal security personnel were completely overhauled to address the new reality of internal threat assessment and intervention procedures. Marcus personally supervised the development of protocols that balanced respect for royal autonomy with the imperative to protect the monarchy from all potential vulnerabilities, regardless of their source. International intelligence agencies praised the British response to the influence operation, noting that the quick identification and neutralization of the foreign contacts had prevented what could have been a significant compromise of European security. The incident became a case study in effective threat detection and response within high-profile protective details. The palace staff gradually adapted to the new security environment, understanding that increased vigilance and reporting requirements were necessary consequences of the vulnerabilities that had been exposed. The culture of deference that had previously discouraged questioning of royal behavior was replaced by a more balanced approach that prioritized institutional security. Princess Anne's leadership during the crisis had strengthened her position within the royal hierarchy, with her practical approach to problem-solving earning widespread respect from both palace officials and security personnel. Her ongoing oversight of the reformed security structure provided continuity and legitimacy for the unprecedented changes. Marcus reflected on the transformation of his role from traditional bodyguard to institutional protector, understanding that his confrontation with Prince George had fundamentally redefined the relationship between the royal family and their protective services. The precedent he had set would guide future generations of security professionals tasked with safeguarding the monarchy. The foreign influence network that had targeted Prince George was systematically dismantled through coordinated international action, with multiple arrests made across Europe and significant financial assets seized. The success of this operation validated the importance of rapid response to emerging security threats, regardless of their unconventional nature. As Marcus settled into his new responsibilities, he understood that the events of those tumultuous weeks had created a stronger, more resilient monarchy better equipped to handle the complex security challenges of the modern era. His willingness to take control during a critical moment had not only protected the royal family, but had also strengthened the institution itself. The palace corridors now hummed with renewed confidence, as staff members understood that their work contributed to a security framework capable of addressing threats from any direction. The uncomfortable precedent of royal family members requiring protective intervention had been transformed into a strength that would serve the monarchy for generations to come.